Hello there, Mandy here. Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart is not just a podcast. It's also a book, a free online grief group, and a one-on-one private coaching practice. If you are interested in learning more, visit mandykapehart.com to find out how restorative grief can help you heal heart, mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. You are listening to episode 185, titled Living from the Heart with Ash Perrow. What would it mean for you to live from your heart? Today, my guest is Ash Perrow, a personal growth coach and musician whose life was forever altered after a near-death experience in 2016. This experience led him to radically shift his understanding of a life purpose and commit to living from his heart. Through his coaching, Ash helps individuals explore their own personalities, their shadow sides, and develop the tools to navigate their own emotional landscapes and find out how to live from their hearts. So in this conversation, Ash is opening up about his deeply personal journey from losing his daughter to stillbirth to overcoming PTSD and depression, and how each of these experiences have informed who he is now and how he shares himself with others. Hey everyone, welcome back to Restorative Grief with Mandy Capehart. I'm your host, Mandy, and today I am joined by Ash Perrow. Ash's powerful journey through grief and transformation, sparked by a near-death experience, shapes his work now as a personal growth coach, and he brings a heart-centered approach to helping others navigate and heal very deeply. So, Ash, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Mandy, and thank you for the beautiful introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited. That seems like such an odd thing to say. I'm so honored to host your story
Yeah.
about your near-death experience because I know that was such a powerful foundation piece for the person you are today. How has that story fleshed out? What happened? Who are you now because of it?
So, in almost 8 years ago, I went into hospital for a back operation.
Mm,
And during the operation, they tore a vein.
mm,
And the surgeons didn't know they tore a vein. I was having a lower back operation. The vein tore in my groin, and they stitched me back up. And I went back to the ward, and I ended up bleeding internally for 16 hours. At the end of that 16 hours, I collapsed and I had no pulse. I wasn't breathing. The emergency team came in. They had the oxygen mask and put all the things on my chest. And I was, I was still conscious at that point, and I was very, very aware of what was happening in the room around me.
mm,
And typically I'm an optimist, and so I was there and going through this experience like, oh, okay, I'll be okay, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. And I could hear them talking about my vitals, and they had no pulse, he's not breathing, and they started going through my blood pressure. And at one point, I heard the one of the emergency team say his blood pressure is 52 on 36. And I thought, oh, okay, this is serious. And they were saying, oh, keep your eyes open, stay with us, Ash, keep your eyes open, keep your eyes open. And I just couldn't. I couldn't hold on anymore. And I thought, oh, I'm dying.
mm,
And I was so immensely sad because nobody that I loved was in the room with me as I was dying.
mm,
And I had just this immense sadness. And then I blacked out. And it wasn't like a normal blackout for me, as in, it wasn't like if I fainted. And
mhm,
so for months after this experience, I questioned my experience and thought, no, I just fainted. And then I got to this point and thought, hang on a second. If I just fainted, how did I have this awareness? How was I able to think? And what my experience was, and there's many, many, many different types of near death experiences that people go through. Mine was that I became ripples. And so I was just these ripples going out in all directions. And I was very aware of what was happening. And I thought, this is dying. This is what death is like. And I just kept going out and out and out as these ripples. So there was no separation. I was the ripples. And I started to bargain, right? I started to go, oh, I want to stay. But there was so much that was happening just moment by moment. It was, similar to like you might see in a movie where there's lots of downloads just kind of going, it was like happening all at once. But I had this real sense of myself that, I'm me. And very briefly, I had this thought, oh, I thought I would become an enlightened Buddha, but I was just me. Right? I thought that when I died, that I would become something else, but it was me. And it was also curious. I had no physical pain. And when I came back into my body, I had ridiculous amounts of pain because I'd lost so much blood and it was pressing on my organs. But the I started to continue saying, oh, I want to stay. I want to stay. And then I started to say all the people that I wanted to stay for. So my daughter, my partner at the time, and I was still the ripples. And I still had this awareness that I was dying. And then something happened where I just felt there was a warmth that came over me. And it's sort of like a golden warmth. And I said, I want to stay for the work that I do and walk the planet from my heart. And the moment I expressed that, I came straight back into my body and opened my eyes. They were saying that I could hear the team saying, we've got a pulse. He's breathing. And I started screaming because the level of pain, it was a level 11 pain. It was just excruciating.
Wow.
But then there was also part of me that's just so grateful to be alive, even though that coming back was so painful. And from that experience, I started to think, hang on a second, the that's like a contract for me. I wasn't living life from my heart. Why wasn't I living life from my heart? I thought I was. I was kind and I was doing things for everybody else. And one of the insights was that I was doing everything for everybody else. It was me that was last, always. I always put my health last. I put everything, money to other people. I was the martyr and I was the miserable martyr. And so for me, coming back to live from my heart meant, actually, this heart is for me to enjoy as well. It's not me giving to everybody else. This heart is for me. And there there was an imperceptible shift initially in me, but I remember one moment. So I was very, very ill. I was in hospital for 3 weeks. Took me almost 8 months to get back to work full time. And one of the first days I was in the hospital, I was in the ICU, and one of the nurses was there, and I said to her, I'm just so grateful to know what this level of suffering is like. And I, it was like I was connecting with the level of suffering that a lot of people live every day. And I thought, wow, I could have gone my whole lifetime without knowing what that level of suffering was like. And I remember noticing that at the time, going, oh, I don't normally think like that. And so from there, it was the relationship that I was in split up 3 weeks after I got out of hospital. And so my daughter and I moved out. We had a blended family in that relationship. So my daughter and I moved out. I basically had sold all my possessions other than my music gear and my daughter's bedroom when we went into this family relationship. And so it was like the universe just stripped me bare. And I had very poor health, virtually no possessions, and we started life again. And it was extraordinary because I had this contract to live by. And I love the idea that our questions drive our existence. So my question was, how do I live from my heart? What's the work that I do? And in the download, I had that the work was to be myself, share myself. And there were specifics, but also it was very, it was very vague too. It was like, oh, okay. How do I be myself, share myself? How do I live from my heart? And so the last 8 years has been this deep dive into, oh, what does it mean to live from my heart? What is consciousness? What was it that was stopping me from living to my potential before? And that invariably led me to leave school teaching, which I'd been trying to leave for 20 years. And then I just naturally became a coach because friends started coming to me to ask me questions. And I thought, oh, I need to, I don't want to be the advice giver. How do I not be the advice giver and
Yeah.
assist others? And so I thought, well, I'll just help my friends. I'll go do this coaching course so that I'm not just giving them advice. And then, of course, that's led to a business. And since since that near death experience, almost everything has changed in my life. I live in a different city. I have a beautiful, loving relationship. We've been married for almost 4 years, and I love the work that I do. Whereas before that, it was I had PTSD, depression. Life was very. I was doing my best, but life was just hard.
Yeah.
Whereas now it can be challenging still at times, but there's just so much beauty, and the experience of connecting to my heart and living from my heart has changed everything.
That is such a concise way to summarize the significance of the last 8 years for you, the way that you have transformed. Obviously, I didn't know you then, but I can sense such a deep, I'll say foundational again, shift toward this new way of moving through the world, if only personified in the decision to become a certified coach versus wanting to give your friends advice. That alone tells me, hey, this is a person who recognizes that just being kind and just being generous and just overflowing all of your resources toward other people is not a fulfilling or sustainable way to live. It's not how we actually build relationship with one another. It's also not how we allow people to flourish and to grow in their own capacity. So that to that point, the way that you were moving through the world before you had this huge question of what does it mean to live a heart-centered life? So how does that now, years later, how did that heart-centered living begin? What did that look like in the starting stages?
Great question. So one of the things I've learned is that I don't give myself anymore. I share myself.
Hmm.
So
Mhm.
that's like, okay, I used to give 100% to everything and everybody. And that left me depleted. There were benefits, of course, otherwise I wouldn't have been doing it. One of which was that, well, I feel love from others. And then if, of course, I didn't get the love back to me, there was resentment, right? It was like I was acting subconsciously to help others so that I would get approval, I would get acceptance, I would get love. And so, but now it's like, okay, if I share myself, it's like, okay, well, I have boundaries, I share myself, but that came through. So from a near-death experience, the first focus was just getting to the point of being able to walk again, being able to eat. Right, I had real difficulties feeding myself because I was so sick.
Mm.
And gradually life just started to expand. And the previous relationship, I'd been all in, as in I had left my friends behind, left where I loved living,
Wow.
moved, and so I had to really start again and reconnect with friends, make new friends. So that was one of the key things, was the social interaction.
Mhm.
Another was, and they have this in the States too, it's in 20 countries. I went and did a retreat called the Path of Love. Have you heard of that retreat?
I've not.
So they do it in Boulder, Colorado in the States.
Okay.
And it's been going since maybe the mid to late 80s. Phenomenal transformational work. And I had done some of their smaller pieces of work in the years before my near death experience, and it had been profound. And so I thought, that's where I'm going to find my heart. How to live from my heart is the path of love. So about 3 months after my near death experience, I was still not 100% health, quite far from it, but I went. And it was, there's so many aspects of that work that go into the depths of suffering, but also the heights of who we truly are. And that work just made the most profound difference to my life. I feel like in that 1 week, I processed 30 or 40 years worth of therapy. And it really connected me to who I was, what was stopping me from being myself. And from there, I kept doing some of their work. So it's not like a funnel where you go in and the first retreat cost you X amount, and then the next retreat costs you double X amount and like that. But I just thought, okay, there's something in this work. So I just pursued that work for a couple of years. And then if you go to the path of love and as a participant, you can then go back as a volunteer and assist. So
Mm.
I've done that about 10 times. I still go back every sort of 18 months or so and assist. And so, but that was just profound for how do people relate and how does trauma impact us and create these barriers where we put in behaviors and beliefs so we don't experience the trauma again.
Mm.
And so, for an example of that for me was in 2005, I had a stillborn daughter, which led me to have PTSD and depression. But one of those moments, I was holding her in the hospital, and my then wife was next to me, laying on the bed, just sobbing. And I had this thought, I'm never going to let anything bad happen to my family ever again.
Yeah.
And that was the exact moment that the trauma got locked in. And I could just remember that moment so clearly. But what happened was over a period of years, and PTSD can be so insidious in that it just creeps up. And that trauma just crept up. And so what happened was I was on alert all the time to try and make sure nothing bad happened to my family. And in that irrationality of that, one of the things that I did was I'm going to make a lot of money so that we have a big house, we have space around the house, and that led to adrenal fatigue because I was staying up late at night trying to make money on the internet as an internet marketer. Plus, I was a deputy principal in a school, and it was just this cycle that then just led to massive burnout and then depression, things like that. So it was me trying to prevent that trauma from happening again that led me down this huge cycle that thankfully I'm not in anymore. There
Yeah.
can still be a little bit of trauma that comes up at time. And I'm holding my fingers together in this tiny little pinch, if people can't see because you're listening, but it can come up. But I've attuned to my body now and attuned to what happens. And so generally I will catch it really, really early and go, oh, yes, hello,
Mm.
friend. There you are.
Yeah. So much of what you just said is invitational because those vows we make, the boundaries, those rigid boundaries we set to protect ourselves when we've encountered some kind of loss and trauma, when you said that locks the trauma in, really does. You're setting up this brick wall in circumference of your entire life and then turning toward hypervigilance to prevent future loss and to really try and stay as safe as possible. I'm curious, and you kind of named it by saying for you that hypervigilance looked like financial security and
Mm,
attempting to prevent any kind of financial instability possible. I think people would relate a lot on that front, but also on other areas, were there any other areas that it showed up for you? Because it's never just one in my experience, but I'm curious how
Mm.
how you might have experienced it too.
Good question. I can't think of other areas, but one of the impacts was, I was already working full time, and then I was staying up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and getting 2 or 3 hours sleep. And so it really impacted my health. But once again, I had the kind of martyr aspect where it's like, keep going, keep going. You're doing this for everybody else. Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, that martyrdom that you mentioned earlier too. It's funny when we put it in that phrase, it sounds very intense and very almost dramatic, and yet it is the only word I can think of to describe that selflessness that comes out of us that we've kind of given a halo to say this is the pinnacle, this is the goal, this is the best way to live your life is unto service toward the ends of your cup toward other people. Take me into the future from this story, back to when you started recognizing what does it look like to live from a heart centered space, sharing myself with others in a way that is sustainable. Because I think the difference between giving of myself and sharing myself is really crucial. And I would like it to be very clear so no one is confused and they can
Mhm.
start to easily labels kind of, well, yeah, easily label where their behaviors are falling and how it's fueling the way they move.
So what comes to mind on that is that in Western society, we really have a lot of reinforcement that you should know your purpose,
Mm,
and then you should devote yourself totally to your purpose.
mm.
And so my take on that is my purpose is to be myself. My purpose is a feeling. And so it's not know myself, it's feel myself. The mind can't comprehend who I am. The mind can't know who I am because being myself is a feeling. And so the way I live my life is okay, what are the practices and the ways of living that most feel like myself? And when I feel like myself, I can effortlessly share myself.
That is so resonant with me. You and I were speaking off air a little bit about the work that I'm doing. And I shared that it felt like coming home to myself in
Mm.
so many ways when I stepped into grief work, which is one of the heaviest, if not the heaviest industries or world of conversation that you can have with people. And yet it feels like somewhere I can come fully to life. I get out of difficult conversations with clients or even on the podcast, and I feel vibrant. I feel resonant. I feel energized. And I want to like find the next person who needs to understand hey, when you come into alignment with who you are, not with the task you're supposed to do, not with this fatalistic idea that, oh, I finally found the job, the people, the location that I'm meant for, but alignment with this sense of self that is so grounded in a peacefulness about yourself, not a, to your point, not a knowing of yourself, but like a different level of self awareness, like a vibration that feels comforting sense of self. It is transformational.
Mm. And we had that when we were children, we had that sense.
Yeah.
And then through our natural process, we lost it, right? And we started worrying about what people think, and of course the rules of whatever tribe we were growing up in, we had to follow those rules. But fundamentally, we had that sense of who we are. We had that inner confidence. We had that joy. It just poured out of us. But then over time, things happened where this is one perspective that we weren't resourced to cope with what was happening in our life.
Yeah.
And so what happened was we shrunk. We put in these little limitations on ourselves, be it in our beliefs or our behaviors, and we shrunk. And there's a point that happens in many people's lives where that people realize, I can't live this way anymore, where I'm in this little box. How do I get out of this box? Be it the box of grief or trauma or the way that they're living in a relationship or the way that they're working. So how do I get out of here? And so then those questions drive the response. So it's like, oh, so for me, what that question, how do I live from my heart? That drove my response to life. And so those questions of people, it's like, oh, how do I move beyond this grief? Then that drives the behavior. And then that is doing that is self-love. Like following those questions that you have, that's self-love.
Mm-hmm. I think to what you just said, the desire as a human to continue changing, I think is inherent. And I mean that in a sense of growing and expanding and understanding new things about ourselves and about the world around us. And I'm thinking about people who are in a very kind of stagnant life. We, as children, thought, like, when I grow up, I'm going to have a family and I'm going to have this prescriptive existence that will be consistent. Well, I was in my like early 20s when I remember thinking for the first time, is this all there is? This can't be all there is. That would be ridiculous because there are many people not doing this and they're fully happy. Okay. That was when I realized I was never meant for the small linear experience of life where I do the same thing every day. But I don't think anyone was truly meant for that. I think we all really want that exploratory essence of ourselves to come back to the surface and ask, what brings me fully to life? What feels like curiosity made manifest in this world around us? And so I'm thinking about the areas where we might have shrunk down into ourselves and how we can get to a place of asking, not is this all there is, but really, what does life look like for me living from a heart centered space, living in a way that is intentional and generous from a sharing point of view, not a giving everything point of view, without a near death experience, without this incredibly unique transformational moment? How can we generate our own? I don't want to say our own near death experience, but our own awakening moment, especially if we don't have access to weeks of retreats and incredible resources.
Mm. So for me, the one is listening.
Mm,
And we have this inner guidance. If we listen to our inner guidance, so people might call it intuition or spirit or the self that comes through, it's there. It's telling us. And so our soul, which I kind of thought, before my near-death experience, we probably live after we die. I didn't really, I wasn't attached to that.
mhm,
But the so now it's like, okay, I have a soul, I have a mind, and I have a body. When those three are aligned, life is amazing. Right? When I'm listening to my soul, my mind is the tool to achieve what my soul is guiding me to do, and my body is the vehicle. So when those three are aligned and I'm listening to what my soul is telling me, my mind is the one that goes and does the tasks. Its job isn't to decide if this is right or wrong, right? I already have that knowing. My mind is to complete tasks. It tries to be the boss, right? There's just the nature of that.
yeah.
And so listening, I need to listen. And if I'm not listening, and this is the other really important piece, my soul will turn up my suffering, trying to get me to listen.
Mm,
So, for example, I was in the relationship before the near-death experience. It wasn't going well, but I would not leave because I was the martyr. That's how I got my sense of worth. And I wouldn't leave, no matter how bad it was. And that
mhm,
had been every relationship before that. I was never the one leaving.
mm,
I was always the one that was being left. And so the universe just kept turning up the suffering. I use the word universe. For me, that's
Yeah.
soul, universe, they're interchangeable. And it kept turning up to the suffering. So I had a back injury. I still wouldn't listen, that I didn't like my work, that I wouldn't leave the job I was in, wouldn't leave the relationship it was in, wouldn't speak up for myself, wouldn't make these changes. And so I had back injury, and then the back injury, I still wouldn't change. And I was taking medication and going to work every day in an immense pain. And I just kept pushing and pushing and pushing through. And so that wasn't the life that I was wanting to live. And I wouldn't listen. So my perspective is, the universe then said, okay, look, you're not going to listen in this lifetime. How about you either die and start again, or you wake up to yourself? So I think we all get this natural awakening, which is our true higher self that's driving us to change.
Mm,
And if we're not going to change, guess what? Here's some suffering to guide you.
mm. Yeah, I think it's easy to vilify our suffering. And certainly as a grief educator and coach, I find a lot of people have accusation and blame and fear attached to their grief experiences and their even just traumatic childhood stories or as they've grown. And we separate ourselves from them in an effort to create safety and even just to protect our inner world, what we have access to from future harm, from more harm. I struggle sometimes to help the person find a path into their suffering, toward their suffering, without making it feel like this is the only way you'll heal. Because I am a strong believer that, yes, trauma work is necessary, but we don't have to relive our traumas to heal from them. There's lots of modalities to move through traumatic experiences, and we know that. But I do think for the person who is able to face their suffering or face their trauma um, in a safe place with, safety and security around them, there is a very unique perception that rises for that person. It's a very different um, bit of information that they pull for themselves that they can start, like a thread begins to unravel around the reason they want those questions answered in the first place. And creating a new sense of safety for themselves becomes the priority without shoving the suffering outside of the circle of self, right? It instead creates this capacity so that they can expand around it, knowing full well, hey, this is part of my life. This is part of my story, my experience. And now I am so much more vast within that space around it that, yeah, I'll see it once in a while. It will come back up, but I'm no longer afraid of it. I'm no longer ruled by it. And I'm certainly no longer beholden to the way it makes me feel in the work I want to do.
I love that. I love that. It's
Mm,
part of the embracing of the whole self, right? That
yeah.
the mind will love to go, no, no, you shouldn't be sad. No,
Right.
no, you shouldn't be angry. And then the next step of that is, well, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
What's wrong with you for feeling grief every day?
Mm,
What's wrong with you? And then that creates a separation where the person goes, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. So then there's shame and guilt and withdrawal. Whereas if there's self-compassion, okay, I'm just going through some grief right now.
yeah.
Okay. And then that just changes everything.
Ash, what would
And
be your one piece of advice for someone listening that's like self compassion? Ah, lovely for thee, not for me. What would be
mhm.
your one thing that says, hey, actually, this is how you can give yourself permission to have some self compassion, to have more grace for your state that you're in now and everything you've gone through to get here?
Mm. Thoughts become words, words become actions, actions become a life.
Mm,
And so if I have compassionate thoughts for myself, I will be different in the world. Whereas if I have harsh thoughts for myself, it will make me withdraw. It will make me edgy with other people. Whereas if even if I am edgy, right, I'm a human being. I have the
Yeah.
whole breadth of emotions. It's like, okay, oh, I just got angry at our son or whatever. It's like, okay, compassion for myself. Okay, that's all right. You were tired. You did this. Okay, you know that the the benefit is in the repair. It's not the moment. It's the repair where the true growth and gift is. So that self-compassion and that voice, training that voice in our head to have self-compassion. And so one example of that is listening to the way that you speak to yourself. Oh, you idiot, you did it again, right? Or something that I practice now, say, it's okay, dear Ash. You were
Mm.
just tired. Okay. And so changing that self-talk to a compassionate voice then has a flow on to everything.
I love that. Ash, I have to tell you, I overheard a speaker one time say, I talk to myself in a joyful tone no matter what. So if I'm criticizing myself and name calling me, I'm doing it in a tone of voice that is hopeful because my brain doesn't know the difference. And I just was gobsmacked at how uninformed that person was. And I was really in my own self, like my former self would have like jumped onto every microphone I could to say, he's completely wrong. Your brain is so wise. Your body is picking up on absolutely everything you say. Why would you curse yourself in any fashion and try to do it with a smile? What an odd self manipulation tool. And what I'm
Mhm.
hearing you confirm is the complete opposite, allowing yourself to release those judgments and release criticism. I just said to someone today, you cannot bully yourself into being a happier human, into a nicer person, into a kinder version of yourself. And so allowing yourself to have compassion for the person you've been, the person you are, the mistakes we make, honoring that we all make them, but not in a glib way, in a, yeah, I made 16 mistakes today, but who's counting? Because I'm offering myself the opportunity to recognize that and say, okay, maybe tomorrow 16, maybe tomorrow 2, maybe tomorrow 200. That's irrelevant. Here and now, that repair, that rupture repair moment of relational strife with others, that applies to me as well in my inner relationship with self.
Beautiful. I love that.
Ash, where can people find you if they would love to know more about your story and all of your work?
So, as far as social media goes, TikTok's the best place to find me. At the
Okay.
moment, there's about 400 videos on TikTok. They range from talking about my near-death experience to how to manage life, how to manage the self, how to manage relationships. There's ashperrow.com, which is my website. And in November the 3rd in the US, November the 4th here in Australia, I'm starting a 28-day challenge. It's called the Confident You Challenge, but basically it's like, okay, connect to yourself, feel yourself. And then I have this framework, which is when we know ourselves, we can be ourselves and then we can back ourselves. And it's this natural process that happens time and time again, because the more I back myself, the more I learn about myself, which means the more I can be myself, which means that I naturally will back myself more and more and more. So it's taking that framework to, four live sessions across the month, as well as a coaching session with me, as well as lots of training resources. And it's like, come on, you're right here. Let's bring you out into the world and let you experience yourself. Because that's the greatest gift there is the self. We take it with us everywhere. It's the self. Let's connect with ourselves.
I love that. Ash, thank you so, so much for making time. I know it's early where you are, and this has been such a beautiful conversation. And I'm just so grateful to get a chance to hear it. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. So grateful to share time with you. And I love your podcast, love the work that you're doing. You're just helping so many people, and it's extraordinary. So thank you.
Thank you for listening to episode 185 of Restorative Grief. Ash's story and his incredibly gentle insights into navigating personal transformation from the heart space have given me so much to reflect on. His work reminds us that grief is not merely a process to endure, but a powerful teacher that can truly guide us to live in a more fully, authentic, and self-compassionate way. To learn more about Ash's work or take advantage of his resources, be sure to check out links in the show notes. He mentioned an upcoming cohort, and of course, this was recorded back in November, but he also has additional new offerings as well as new instances of the cohort. So be sure to check it out and learn more about his work. Thank you as always to my patrons, because I could not do this without you, and I'm so grateful for your support. And as always, before we go, one last thing. Please remember, the only solution for grief is to do the work of grieving. Thank you for listening. I will see you next week.